Hello there, welcome to Brian Lomax Movie Talk, and the second in my series of videos in which I rank Batman movie villains. Now, I did the Tim Burton and Joel Schumacher movies, 4 movies in total, 9 villains in total. This video, I'm going to be doing the same thing, but with the Nolan universe. Same rules applied to this as applied to the Burton and Schumacher ones, starting off with the worst, working my way to the best. As with the Burton and Schumacher years, I'm talking about the villains as fully formed characters. This isn't just about performance. Let's face it, if we're going just on performance, Heath Ledger's Joker is number 1. This isn't about just performance, although that plays a factor. This is about the character. The way they're interpreted, the threat they pose to Batman, the threat they pose to the city. My favourite ain't necessarily the same as what I would say is the best. So here we're talking about the best. Who's the best villain? Who is the best villain in the Nolan trilogy? So yeah, with that in mind, let's get into it with all 9, 10, 9, 10. It's 10. Here's number 10. Number 10 from Batman Begins is Zsasz, Victor Zsasz. Now, this is a character in Batman Begins that I would imagine for most viewers, I mean, some people may even now be watching this, listening to me and think, Zsasz, who the hell is Zsasz? Zsasz, right, is one of my favourite villains from the comic books. And Nolan did a really great job of just throwing him in there as this kind of side character. He doesn't have the kind of gravitas that Joker or Bane or anything like that has. He's not as famous yet, but he is a favourite of mine. It was just great to see him here. And to top it off, he's played by Tim Booth, who is the lead singer for one of my favourite bands, James. And I was literally the only person in the audience when I first saw Batman Begins on the big screen, who recognised him and shouted it out and pointed at the screen and looked like a complete maniac. But yeah, I got so excited when Tim Booth popped up as Zsasz, one of my favourite villains. Now, unfortunately, he isn't used that much. He's a hitman for the mob. We see him on trial. He's essentially there to show how the system works. Or doesn't work, as the case may be. The courtroom system, the law system in Gotham is very corrupt. It allows people like this guy to get off. He sits there in the docks, kind of grinning because he knows he's going to walk. So yeah, and then he comes back into play towards the end of the film and just has a little thing where Batman takes him out pretty easily. Like I say, for your common viewer, it's not going to make much of a dent. But for me, as a die-hard Batman fan, seeing this guy, seeing the scars on him, like if you know him from the comic books, you'll know that for every person he kills, he cuts himself. He puts a scar on his body. Every scene he's in, he's fully clothed. But if you look closely, you can see these scars on his neck, and later you can see a few on his arms. And it's just that little detail where it's like, yeah, that is Zsasz from the comic books. Next up is Maroni. Now, in the comic books, Falcone and Maroni are 2 opposing gangsters. Obviously, we got Falcone in Batman Begins. In The Dark Knight, presumably because Falcone is taken out in Batman Begins, Maroni kind of steps up to the plate, becomes the number 1 gangster. So he's the one who basically hires the Joker. He's the one who lights the fuse. Who makes the mistake of hiring the Joker to do their dirty business. Though, given that the Joker was clearly up to some stuff before he got hired by Maroni, I think that the Joker would have found a way somehow towards doing what he does in this film, regardless of Maroni. But suffice to say, Maroni is the guy who's responsible for all the gangsters that kind of populate particularly the second film. And he's played by Eric Roberts, who I think is an alright actor, to be honest. He tends to be in a lot of films I don't like, but my brother does, these kind of dumb action, straight to DVD type fare. But he's done some pretty decent stuff in his time, and when he's given the right role, he can be pretty good. Here, he is just your bog standard kind of gangster, and it's why he's he's essentially at the bottom. I know I put Zsasz at the bottom, but that's literally because he gets practically zero screen time. He's there as a throwaway kind of nod, wink to the fans. Whereas Robert's character, Maroni, in this, he does get quite a big chunk of screen time. He's a functional character. He's a character that is used to put other pieces into play and kind of affect the lives of other characters, which will then come back to bite him on the ass later on. But beyond that, his reach kind of extends his grasp, so to speak. He bites off more than he can chew, and therefore it kind of diminishes his threat level. The more this guy kind of digs, the more you realise actually he's not that much of a threat. It's the peripheries around him that are more threatening. And number 8 is Carmine Falcone, which is essentially Maroni's predecessor. The reason I put him a little bit above Maroni is just because I feel like he's a bit more instrumental in making Batman, essentially, in pushing Batman into existence. Without Falcone, without his dirty tricks and his kind of corruption eating away at the city, there would be no Bruce Wayne's parents getting murdered. There would be no the level of crime in Gotham the way it is, and therefore no Batman. So this guy is essentially the reason for Batman existing. He's clearly a despicable character. He's not necessarily the highest on the food chain. Obviously we have Ra's al Ghul, and even Scarecrow is willing to give this guy some sass despite his threats, and Scarecrow even kind of induces him with his fear toxin at one point, which again kind of takes the threat level of this guy down somewhat. But when Bruce is just Bruce and not Batman, before he becomes Batman, then this guy is a threat. When Bruce just walks into his place to tell him he's not afraid of him, you realise the power this guy has, because he's got a judge in there that he's bought off. He's got his underlings who basically give Bruce Wayne a good going over. He ain't Batman yet. He couldn't take this guy down. He has to go off and do his training first. And once he becomes Batman, then this guy becomes low level. Number 7 for me is Talia al Ghul, played by Marion Cotillard. Now, I like Cotillard as an actor. I've seen her in a lot of stuff that I've really liked. She is a great actress. She really is. And for most of The Dark Knight Rises, she's a great actress. She does a fantastic job with the character, it must be said. But her death scene it's the one moment in The Dark Knight Rises that I can't defend. There's a lot of people who complain about The Dark Knight Rises and make out like it's a terror. It's nowhere near as good as the first two, and I disagree completely. And even written on the page, her death scene is fine. As the way it's written is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just the way it's handled, where she's just like, ugh. It's a little bit. Oh, she didn't have a better take than that, Nolan, surely. But beyond that, I think she's a really good villain. She's kind of revealed to be the main villain in a way. I don't think it takes anything away from Bane. I know a lot of people do. In many ways, it's like I think people would levy the same argument at the relationship she has with Bane as Poison Ivy did with Bane in Batman and Robin. The difference here is monumentally huge in that Bane has agency. Bane has free thinking, free choice. He does what he does out of love for this woman. So I don't see it as a manipulation in the way that Poison Ivy was manipulating this half-witted imbecile ape man. This is two people who are mutually exclusive in their designs and their plans for Gotham City. It's just, her need for vengeance is the match that Bane needs to start the fire that he wants to start, so that the two of them coming together just makes sense. Most of her villainy, it comes after the fact on a rewatch. You have to go back and have a rewatch to see where she's actually, playing cards and dealing hands and this, that and the other, and being treacherous. Whereas like you get a character like Bane, he's a villain from the offset, this, that, and the other. You get to see him doing all these villainous things. So she's certainly more manipulative, more secretive. But I guess I would have liked, once the reveal happened, I would have liked a bit more from her, a bit more screen time with her as the villain. But it's like she reveals that she is the mastermind, and then boom, we're right into the climax, and then she's taken out. And number 6 is Catwoman, and I know what you're probably saying right now. Catwoman isn't a villain. She's a hero. Yes, she is by the end of the film. But like from about 2/3 of the way in, she's an anti-hero. She's an anti-heroine. So at the start of the film, she does villainous things. She steals. She robs. She KOs Bruce, who's basically a crippled man. He's a guy on a stick, and she nails him to the floor. Not the nicest thing to do. And she is responsible for leading him into Bane's trap. So she does do some things that need penance, that need her to repay a debt to society, so to speak. The thing that stops her being an out-and-out villain is that she does that. So she claws her way back, and she works her way up to being more of a hero than a villain. But the start of the film, the first half of the film, she is a villain. She does some villainous things. She's working for herself. She's looking out for herself. Given the situation she's in, it's understandable, but she wouldn't be in that situation if she hadn't done some bad things in the past to begin with. So, yeah. So the reason she's not higher up on this list is because of that fact, is because she's not an out-and-out villain, is because she does redeem herself. From a performance standpoint, she would be higher on this list. She would definitely be higher on this list. I thought Anne Hathaway gave a really great performance in The Dark Knight Rises. I was very sceptical when she got cast, because she was in a lot of these, Princess Diary and Devil Wears Prada, those kind of movies, and I was like, I don't know about this. I don't know about her as Catwoman. But as Nolan's done time and time again with his casting, he proved me wrong, and she proved me wrong. Number 5 is Harvey Two-Face, Harvey Dent / Two-Face. A little bit of a reversal of Catwoman here, in the sense that for the most of the movie, he's actually a good guy. He's essentially the brunt of the Joker's plan, which is to show that actually you can corrupt the incorruptible. Because of that, as a character, he has probably the most depth out of any of the villains in this. It's just it takes a while for him to become the villain. But when he gets there, once his mind becomes fractured and he leaves everything up to chance, he decides all of his whims to a flip of a coin, that's when he becomes villainous. That's when he becomes someone who is unpredictable, because it's literally like, I'm not deciding, I'm going to flip a coin and it's going to decide for me. And that leads to him doing some really heinous things. Obviously we get to the end of The Dark Knight and he's about to kill Gordon's children. He's willing to kill Gordon's children if that coin tells him to do so. And that's what makes him an out-and-out villain, because no matter what good Harvey Dent did, no matter how much of a shining light he was, you go down the path that he's about to go down, there's no coming back from that. By the time we get to the end of The Dark Knight, Harvey is anything but wholesome. He's completely cast aside any responsibility towards moral judgment, because he now leaves it to chance, leaves it to a coin to decide, which makes him an interesting character, makes him a sad character given everything he's gone through. You really empathise with this guy because he's lost everything. He's been pushed right to the edge, quite literally, by the Joker, and unfortunately he's fallen off that precipice. Number 4 for me is Scarecrow, who is the only villain in cinematic terms to have appeared in 3 Batman movies. So he's in each of the Nolan trilogy movies. He is the villain I have most fun with, to be honest, other than the Joker. He has quite a big role in Batman Begins, and then he has a minor role. He kind of pops up again in the next 2 films. It's just really good world building to have Cillian Murphy just keep popping up as Scarecrow. He's just still out there doing his thing. But I have fun with this guy because the Scarecrow is a really interesting character anyway. From the comic books, he's one of my favourite villains. But I love what Cillian Murphy does with the character here in this trilogy. And it was, yeah. When I saw him pop up in The Dark Knight, that was amazing. And going into The Dark Knight Rises, I really hoped he would pop up again. And he did, and I was like, yes. He's essentially an underling, but because of the way Nolan uses him, particularly in Batman Begins, you know, the character himself feeds very much into the theme of the film, which is fear. And, you know, obviously Scarecrow, you know, he uses fear toxin in that, but he's the perfect character to use when you're delving into that theme of fear. You know, and what does fear do to people? What does fear do to a society? You know, creating mass panic. And you look at things that are going on today, it feels just as relevant as it ever did. But he is a great character for exploring the effects of fear on both a societal level, but also an individual level. He may not be the main villain. He's never the main villain in any of these 3 Nolan movies, but he's always used in the right way. Number 3 is Ra's al Ghul. Now, a lot of people will say that the film that made Liam Neeson the badass, you know, the old man badass, is Taken. And it's not. It's Batman Begins. Taken was done after Batman Begins, and he's kicking all kinds of ass here. You know, he goes toe to toe with Bruce and like, you know, some real good sword fighting stuff going on between Liam Neeson and Christian Bale. There's some great stunt work from both actors. You know, if you look behind the scenes, they were doing a lot of their own stuff there in that fight sequence. And then later on, you know, once Bruce is Batman, he goes toe to toe with him again. This guy is almost Batman's equal in a way. He's the guy who trained Batman. He's the guy who made Batman what he is, helped him become the man he needed to become. I like the deviousness of this guy, the way he operates in the shadows. You know, the organization that works for him, his organization is the League of Shadows. Is the reason for that name, is that they hide in the shadows. They do everything they do in concealment, and this guy is a master at concealment. There's only a touch of his history in there. Now, if you know the comic books, if you know the comic book origin of the character, you could go wild with all the Lazarus Pit theories and stuff. It could very well exist. You know, for those who don't know, the character in the comic books, he uses a Lazarus Pit, a thing called a Lazarus Pit that resurrects him. He's been around for 600 years. And I could very much believe that is the case here. There's a moment in the film when he alludes to having a wife once, and something. It's a very painful memory for him that kind of spurred him on to create the League of Shadows and thereby clean up the world by taking down cities that had become too big and too gross and too crime-ridden. So there's enough in there. It's only sparing, but it's enough to make you know who this guy is. Nolan is very faithful to the comic book characters, even though he only peppers things in. You know, as a Batman fan, as a comic book fan, it feels like the character from the comic books, without going large, without showing you everything that would be in the comic book stories. It takes the important details, the details that matter. And ultimately, Ra's al Ghul is a big threat. You know, like these top 3 villains now, they're the biggest threats to the city, essentially. You know, Talia al Ghul was a major threat, but without Bane, I don't feel like she could have instigated everything that she did. You know, she needed Bane, she needed the League of Shadows that were kind of under Bane's thumb at that time. I just don't think she could have got to where she got to without Bane. So these top three villains, they literally, they don't just pose a threat to Batman, they pose a city-wide threat. They're city destroyers if they get their way. And Ra's al Ghul is the first on the chopping block for that. You know, he comes very close to destroying Gotham through fear. But number two for me is Bane, and he's basically, he's the next level of fulfillment of Ra's al Ghul's plan. He is Ra's al Ghul without the sense of morality. You know, like as evil as the plan was that Ra's al Ghul put into motion, it's still born out of a moral responsibility to the planet. Whereas with Bane, it's not about that at all. He's, you know, he just wants to, essentially, to quote to quote Alfred when he's referring to the Joker, he just wants to watch the world burn. It's just that he's not quite as crazy as the Joker, in the sense that he's not as all over the place and skittish and kind of unpredictable. He's meticulous. His plan is very meticulous. You know, saying that, so is Joker's. It may appear random, but I don't believe it is. Bane is both a physical and a mental threat to Bruce / Batman. You know, he breaks Batman in the film, as he does in the comics. He breaks his back, so he pretty much wins. You know, if he hadn't have let Batman live at that moment, that's it, it's game over. But because obviously he's working with Talia wants Bruce to see the destruction of his city as vengeance for the death of her father. That is their downfall. That's Bane's downfall. His love, ultimately. Love for another person is Bane's downfall. If he'd have gone under his own steam, done it his way, Batman would be over. But because he loves Talia and he's willing to let her have her cake and eat it, ultimately that cake gets shoved in their face and squidged about. Bane, major physical threat, great planner. You know, he takes down the city almost, like what pretty much does for a good few months until Bruce returns. This guy is pretty much neck and neck with the Joker, which obviously, once again, as with the Burton Schumacher years, is my number one. As with Nicholson's Joker, Ledger's, one, it's got the best performance from the host of actors that came to deliver these villains to the screen. And as I said before, it's not really about the performance, it's about everything. And the reason the Joker is number one, again, as with Nicholson in that first Tim Burton Batman film, it's the unpredictability. This guy's psychosis is just, it's all over the place. You know, he's got the meticulous planning that Bane has, because if you look at what he does in this film, you can't just do that randomly. He clearly plans things 3 steps ahead of everyone. So he's very meticulous, like Bane. And while he doesn't pose the physical threat that Bane does, the unpredictability of his nature, the fact that he can just flip on a dime, and the fact that he doesn't care about being hurt. When Batman hurts him, when he beats him in the cell, he doesn't care. He laughs it off. He's getting his brains beaten out and he's laughing because he doesn't care about his own life. He doesn't care about dying. You know, it's that unpredictability, it's that psychosis, and it's the meticulous nature of his planning that make him an absolute threat to the city. You know, I feel like he doesn't just have one end game. You know, you look at Bane, he's got an end game. And I feel like if you stop that bomb, boom, he's got to go back to the drawing board. I feel like he would retreat, regather his kind of troops and whatnot, come up with something else, and then come back. Whereas the Joker, in his planning, you feel like this guy's got 20 plans on the go at once. If one fails, he goes down another route. As he says, the plan with the ships at the end, it's not the only thing he's got up his sleeve. He's got an ace in the hole, which is Harvey. So he's got all these different plans going on at once. Any one of them could tear the city apart. So yeah, that's what makes him my number one. Just a stellar roster of villains, brilliant films. As you know, I've said that many times before. My favourite movies. I love these villains, love these characters. So there you go, that's my ranking of all the villains from the Nolan Dark Knight Trilogy. But how would you rank them? Let me know what you think of my ranking. Let me know what your ranking is down in the comment section below. Thank you for watching this video, and until next time, cracking.